Welcome to Shad's Guitar Show. Whether it's the gear or the players who made the gear famous, join me each week as we discuss all things guitar. Well, hey everybody, welcome into another episode of Shad's Guitar Show. Thanks for joining me today. Glad to have you along for the ride as we continue discussing some amplifier stuff. So I wanted to go across the pond. We talked last episode about Fender style amps. We talked about the 6V6, 6L6 kind of sound. But now I want to go over and take a look at what the Brits were offering in the early days of amplifiers in the way of EL84 and EL34 amplifiers, and kind of what's the difference between those two different tube complements. They're both great, but they're a lot different. So we can kind of pare it down to, and again, were plenty of other amplifiers that were made over there. But for our purposes today, we're going to be discussing really VOX and Marshall. All right. And I assume pretty much everyone listening already knows this, but in case you aren't familiar with what EL84 and EL34 tubes are, they are the tubes that go in the power amp section of a guitar amplifier. All right, so let's dive into the EL84 sound, and we're focusing, as I said, mostly on VOX or VOX type circuits. Classic amps like the VOX AC15, the AC30, modern companies like Matchless, Bad Cat have made some really nice boutique recreations of the EL84 platform, and lots of others. But really what I want to talk about is, what is the EL84 sound? Well, the EL84 is a smaller preamp tube. It runs at lower plate voltage than the EL34 and typically produces somewhere between 15 and 30 watts in most of the designs that you find these in. They have earlier breakup, faster, softer compression. They're bright, punchy, and harmonically rich. So I guess if you had to describe the EL84 sound in one word, I think a lot of us would think of the same word, and that is chime. But let's be more specific. Clean tone. The sparkling top end, the bell-like upper mids, slight compression, even clean, and that 3D shimmer when strummed. There's a musical softness to it, even at moderate volumes. EL84 amps just feel alive. But really where they shine is edge of breakup. Crunchy, but still articulate, slightly gritty, very sweet harmonic texture, very touch sensitive, just a really great sound. And when you know that sound, it's just hard to beat. Now, overdriven, you'll get complex upper harmonics, a compressed attack, singing sustain, and sometimes a slightly mid-focused character. EL84 distortion doesn't feel huge. It feels textured and vocal. And a handful of players really closely associated with the EL84 VOX tone would be Brian May of Queen, The Edge from U2, Tom Petty and Mike Campbell used AC30s a lot with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Rory Gallagher actually used AC30s. And in the modern era country, there's a lot of players using the AC30 circuit, but one of the biggest ones that you hear about a lot is Brad Paisley. And he actually got hip to the AC30 sound from a player named John Jorgensen, who was in the Desert Rose Band. EL84 style amps are often associated with the British invasion, the Beatles in particular, jangle pop, Brit rock, indie rock, a lot of worship music, and anywhere where you're finding low to mid gain, really expressive kind of rock where you're looking for, a huge focus on that edge of breakup, just slightly broken up tone. right, so let's contrast that with the EL34, in particular, the Marshall circuit. So these classic amps would be the Marshall Plexi, the Marshall JCM 800. A lot of high watt amps were also using the EL34 platform. And in the modern world, we have amps like Friedman and many others who are seeking to replicate those more high gain tones, those classic Marshall kind of sounds. And there's plenty of great boutique builders building really killer Marshall style amps. So what is the EL34 sound? Well, first of all, it's a much larger power tube that runs at higher voltages, produces usually between 50 and 100 watts in typical designs. It's got a bigger low end, more headroom, more aggressive mid-range push, and this is really the sound of big rock stages. All right, so let's dive a little deeper into the EL34 sound. So clean, they have stronger low mids, less shimmer on the top end than an EL84, more authority, they're punchier and bolder, not so sparkly, but more muscular, I guess. At edge breakup, there's a thick mid-range grind, a very percussive attack, a tight low-end punch, less compression than an EL84. And EL34 amps feel stiffer and kind of more powerful. Now, overdriven is obviously where the EL34 Marshall style amp really thrives. And this is classic British crunch. Think aggressive upper mids, big harmonic bloom, more headroom before saturation, broader low end, and the EL34 distortion just feels really big and larger than life. And just a couple of players we associate with the EL34 Marshall tone would be Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page, Angus and Malcolm Young, and Slash. EL34 is really associated with hard rock, classic rock, arena rock, heavy blues, and early metal. So let's discuss feel and dynamics a bit. So an EL84 amp has a softer attack, faster compression, breaks up sooner, feels responsive and sort of elastic. They're great for expressive players who use the volume knob a lot because you can really dial in that edge breakup to more grind to clean. Now, EL34 amps feel firmer in the low end. They have more headroom, stronger pick attack, and a bigger kind of stage presence. And they're great for big, powerful riffs and, big power chords, anywhere where you need a lot of authority in your tone. So which one is more suited to your playing style? Well, in a perfect world, we could have both. And honestly, in today's day and age where a lot of us are using profilers or modelers, we can have a lot of those different flavors available to us at any time. But if you're talking about just having a tangible amplifier, well, an EL84 is great if you like that Vox sparkle, that really great chime. You play, maybe indie rock or jangle pop or any kind of expressive rock where you want that really middle ground edge of breakup, great chime. And you want to get those tones at manageable volumes. Now, an EL34 amp might be just the thing if you want that classic Marshall crunch. You play heavier rock, you need more stage volume, and you just really love that aggressive mid-range punch. For me personally, primarily being a worship guitar player, I've always gravitated to the EL84 sound. I just love the sound of a cranked AC30. There are so many great examples of that out there. And I will actually link to a playlist of a few songs that represent what I think are the perfect Vox sound and also the perfect Marshall sound. I'll do maybe 6 songs, and you can find the playlist linked here so you can check those out. And that'll give you a pretty good idea of the quintessential sounds of both of these amplifier types. So anyway, thank you for joining me for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please make sure to share it with a friend. If you're not following me on social media, please do that. Shad's Guitar Show on Instagram, and subscribe to Shad's Guitar Show on YouTube. Here on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you could give me a rating, leave a comment. It really helps the show, and that would be awesome if you would do that. And I look forward to talking to you guys again next time.